Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give it a like and subscribe and make sure that you follow us. We have Theresa Ivancik on the podcast. She's coming to us. Are you in Pennsylvania? Is that where you are?
Correct.
Correct? Okay, yeah. Well, so the weather might not be as bad as it is here, but still, we're not talking, it's not like we're talking to someone from Florida or Texas or someplace where you just hate the person because you're just like, oh my God, screw you. Like, just talking to them makes me a little bit warmer, but she's an IFBB pro. She was a Chicago pro champion. She also was in the 2020 Olympia, and she's a Wings of Strength ambassador, as you can see from the jacket that she's wearing. We've had a couple of them on. Most importantly, she's our current guest. Theresa, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan.
Well, I got to ask first of all, because I love to torture myself, what is the weather like in Pennsylvania today?
Today it is extremely icy, and I have 1 million people following. So it's really bad.
Yeah, I was shoveling the patio like 3 days ago, and I forgot to wear those boots that we have that they have like spiky things kind of on the bottom of them so you don't slip, and I slipped like 4 times. So yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from, and I don't want to get too much into that because I don't want to depress half of our viewers that have never experienced a cold winter and be like, oh, this is just depressing. So before we do that, why don't you give us your backstory on what really inspired and motivated you to get in shape and how that led to where you're currently at right now?
So I back whenever I was, oh God, in high school, I was looking at those oxygen magazines, and the girls in those were just in phenomenal shape. And I've always wanted to be one of those, and I didn't know how. I had no idea how. And this is going back to the fact that we had AOL at the time. We didn't have social media. I didn't have cell phones, Facebook, Instagram, and all that stuff. So I didn't even know how to find a coach. So I Googled everything, and I ended up finding a local trainer back home, which ended up being my fiance now, and we've been together for 14 years. But with all that being said and done, I had an eating disorder for 7 years, and he had taught me that food is fuel, and that you can change your body composition. You can be very healthy. It's very beneficial. And him and I hooked up about around 2007. I did my first figure show, and then it kind of started on from there.
Well, being that you started in 2007, which I don't think that seems that long ago, but then when you look at it, you're like, holy crap, that's like almost 14 years coming up on it. And the fitness industry, and especially bodybuilding, is always ever evolving. Like you said, you started out in figure. The figure girls the way that they look now, that's basically bikini right now. But what were some of the biggest changes that you've seen in the, almost 14 years that you've been doing this sport?
When I was doing figure, I didn't look good. I don't look like the girls now at all. But when we started competing, it was figure or you were a bodybuilder. So I think it was more based on, do you have mass or do you not have mass? So, and then it got down to the point of conditioning, which I had no point of conditioning, whenever I first started. But I think that a lot of the divisions have changed. More have opened up. Now we have bikini, we have physique, then the figure girls and the bodybuilders, of course. So now there's a lot of diversity where, there's more options for girls to pick and choose where they think that they belong, and then kind of go from there.
How long into your journey before you decided that you wanted to do bodybuilding as opposed to figure?
I lasted probably actually 1 year in figure, 2. I did a show towards the end of the year in 2007, and then I did 2008, and I realized there was 25, 30 people in my class, and I didn't do very well. But it was the fact of me being able to eat now, coming out of an eating disorder, being able to put on size, and I went straight from figure, took 2009 off, and then competed in 2010 with my grandfather whenever he was 83, and that was our first bodybuilding show together.
Wow. That is incredible. And when you were getting started working out, I ask this to everyone that's on. If you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape, whether it comes down to their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what type of exercises they do. So many little things add up into that overall package that people end up seeing. And if you were to walk up to someone and say, hey, what'd you train for that body part? It looks amazing. What works best for them 99% of the time isn't going to work as good for you. What was that like, sort of figuring out, just your own individual journey? Because it's so much trial and error that I don't think the general public really understands.
It is. I'm still currently right now working on the legs. I still have not found out 100% what gets those actually conditioned and put on a little bit more size. Everybody's got a lacking body part. That's always been mine. Some people have backs, some people have chest, some people have arms, but you have to find out, is it the positive and negative movements and the slower controlled movements? Do you need to move more intense with little to no rest periods in between? or do you need to go hard and heavy with longer restorations in between? So, like you just mentioned, it's a lot of trial and error. And I mean, I'm going to go back way back from like 2007. I kept a dang notebook, one of those little 99-cent notebooks. I mean, but I wrote down like how I felt, how I looked, and it was a complete journal so I could make a decision on what I needed to do and monitor my progress.
Yeah. And you mentioned that legs were one thing that really took you a while and you're still working on 'em. Welcome to the club. I'm 6'3", so I mean, legs and lower body are just one thing. I could inject pure muscle into my legs and they wouldn't gain an ounce. Don't even get me started on calves. I could do 10,000 calf raises a day and, they just won't grow. But what was one body part that really took off for you when you got started?
Oh god, probably my chest and shoulders and back. I mean, those. I mean, my upper body it completely developed really, really quickly. I have a ridiculous chest. I mean, and as a female, it's not really something that you really want to have. But I unfortunately I do. But it's most of my upper body is very well developed compared to my legs.
So how do you offset that? Because I mean, if you were just an average gym bro, I mean, you'd be like, oh yeah, my upper body's great, and you wouldn't even work out lower body. But I mean, being that you're a bodybuilder, I mean, you got to have everything in proportion. Is it just you don't train upper body as much, and then you really like to focus on the legs, or how does that work? Because yeah, if you were to walk up on stage, just really, really jacked up top, and then with those skinny legs, I mean, yeah, you're not even gonna place probably.
Yeah, I mean, I still train pretty much the same, but I really dictate how much weight I use because I really don't need the muscle to grow anymore. I need it more conditioned. So a lot of supersets, drop sets, different style training, and then legs. I'll try to split at least 2 days a week, whether they're two overall leg days or one split between quad dominant and then hamstring dominant.
And when you were thinking about getting into bodybuilding, was there any reservations that you had about the sport? Was there anything that you're like, oh, I don't know, or were you always just like, oh, I'm 100%, I want to just do this and see what happens?
I mean, I've done a lot of interviews and some reality TV shows, and there was three original goals that I had. I wanted to be a trainer, I wanted to be an IFBB professional athlete, and I wanted to own my own gym. And I had succeeded in all of those. So then they had said, now what do you do? And then I did research. So I was like, pick a bigger mountain to climb. So now it's like, okay, now you're a pro, so let's go win a pro show. And then I go out and win a pro show. So it's like climb again. So once you do that, you're like, okay, now what do you want to do? And then I ended up winning another pro show. And then we ended up at the Rising Phoenix World Championships I was there 3 years. The last 2 years I was sixth in the world and seventh in the world. So then it was like, now what? And then it's like, oh wait, guess what? We're going to the Olympia. So it's like we climbed pretty much as high as you possibly could climb. And I tell everybody now I have one more step on a ladder, and it's to hold the title of the Olympia. And all of my dreams are fulfilled.
Well, and what was the feeling like for you when they announced that, yeah, bodybuilding's back at the Olympia now? Because I mean, it's been a while since it was last there, and I mean, it must have just been such a great feeling. But what was your reaction like when you found out that, like, oh my God, they're having it back at the Olympia finally?
I actually got very fortunate that year in 2019. I had competed at the World Championships. I had gotten sixth place, but they also Wings of Strength was rewarding the best poser awards at that competition, and I believe they picked the top five, and I was one of them. So what that entitled was we were invited to the 2019 Olympia to work the expo and to compete and do our routine on stage at the amateur show. So that was for cash prize and everything. Unfortunately, I didn't get that one. But we had tickets to go to the Olympia, and we kind of had an idea, but we weren't sure when it was going to get announced. And we were all in the box booth up top watching the actual show, and it was an honor to freaking be there to actually see it in person and be announced in person that it was coming back.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, yeah, I just don't. I don't get it why it was ever taken away, but yeah, when it got announced it was coming back, I was like, yeah, this is absolutely amazing. But before we get into competing at the Olympia, because that's a whole different segment in and of itself that we'll do later on. I mean, one of the biggest myths and stereotypes that I love to bust on this podcast, and we talked about it briefly before we started recording. I mean, it's gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram, but there's still so many women that have that fear that the moment they walk into a gym, if they even make eye contact with the weights, they're gonna put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight. First of all, if I had that type of self confidence, I would be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company right now. So, and it's just obviously not true. And if that ever did happen, you'd probably be the first ever trillionaire because everybody and their brother would, I would spend my entire life savings to work out with you. I don't know about anyone else, but did you ever have that fear when you were getting started? And even if you didn't, I bet you still hear that all the time now. How do you like to respond to that?
I first started, you remember I came out of an eating disorder. So it was I had to go to one extreme to another. And I just had to just, I found weights. Like it was just like, okay, I gotta have another addiction. I gotta have a reason to do this. So it was like eating high calories of food and just training crazy, crazy. I do train a lot of people online, and I do train a lot of people in house at our gym. The A lot of the women, I mean, I will say they do, it has not been the same like it used to in the past, but a lot of them, it was the same myth of like, I don't want to get big. And what a lot of the women need to understand, you can only get as big as you eat. So you're only going to produce as much as you do put the caloric intake in wise. Just because you decided I use 5 pounds and I jumped to 10 and 15, I'm going to become this huge monster. It's humanly impossible. And what a lot of people also need to understand is these people that they're looking up to, the people like, let's just say myself and a lot of the other pros, they got to keep in mind we've been doing this for 14, 15, 20, some 25, 20, even more than that years. So this is years and years and years of hard work and critiquing and building your own personal foundation. It's humanly impossible to grow that big that fast.
Well, and you're training specifically to grow. It's not like you're training to tone yourself up and stuff. And it's like, no, that's, first of all, that word should be erased from the English language dictionary, because I absolutely hate it whenever people say, oh, I just want to get a tone. I was like, well, what do you think is going to be underneath that? You just want skin and bones, basically, where I don't even get me started on that. But yeah, it's definitely, yeah, it's one of those things where it's just fascinating. But one thing that I think impacts women so much more positively than men when it comes to working out, and it impacts men as well, though, is that confidence boost that working out gives you. I mean, we've heard hundreds of stories on this podcast of women who have made life-changing decisions. I mean, it's really helped them maybe become more assertive. And that's always the one thing that you can take from the gym and use to impact your life in a positive way. How have you personally taken that working out and use it to impact your life in a positive way?
Back in school, I was extremely shy. I mean, I had friends. I was friends with everybody. I didn't have new cliques or anything. But whenever I had our 10-year reunion came up, and I was actually a guest speaker at that, and I was petrified. I was very scared, and I mean, I gave the speech, but it was the same thing. Like the speech could be better now if I did it. I mean, I do speak at colleges a lot about breaking the norm and things like that, and psychology classes and stuff. And I feel like my confidence level and my trustworthy on what I'm saying and telling people, I'm much more better with. But it's the same thing, like you said. When you're in the gym, you gain confidence because you feel good. And then, like let's say you got a job interview, or you have a speech you have to give, or you have to anything specific. You're gonna be more confident in that because you feel good about yourself. So the gym, a lot of people think it's a lot of the appearance part. I mean, it's really not. It's teaching you a lot of discipline and just self confidence in yourself.
No, and that's one thing that I love to preach on this podcast, is that this is so much more of a mental journey than it is a physical journey. Obviously, people are going to notice the physical journey and just be like, "Oh my God, you look amazing," but they don't even understand that the mental journey. I mean, it's 100% more powerful, and it's so much more impactful. But going from an eating disorder, like you said, going from one extreme to another, what was that mental journey like for you? Because I mean, that must have been just absolutely just mind-boggling to go from not eating that much to having to basically stuff your face full. What was that like, adjusting to all that mentally?
It was hard in the beginning because like it was just trust in the system, and I just kept saying like this is going to help me, not hurt me. This is not toxic. This is food. This is fuel. And then you had to understand where it was going and why you were taking it, and why you had to have water, why you had to have food in order to progress. So I think like I was able to, which don't get me wrong, there's some people that just can't do it. They do need to seek professional help. But I was able to trigger my mind, find that new addiction, and force all of that drive into the whole you got to eat, sleep, and train. And then you have that mindset, and you pick that original goal, and you know where you want to be at the end of the day, and you start seeing the results. I mean, it's priceless.
Yeah, and it's definitely, yeah, one of those things where, yeah, the moment you start to see those results. But again, this is not a lifestyle that people in my generation should really get into, because I mean, everyone wants everything now and they want it yesterday. Where it's like, yeah, this is not the one lifestyle that you're really ever gonna see those results. So yeah, it's definitely one thing that I think adds on to even more of my respect to the competitors. Is that, yeah, it's like it's not one of those things that you're gonna see just overnight. But nutrition is one of the most important, if not the most important thing when it comes to this lifestyle. I mean, it's 80 to 90% of the results that you're gonna see, and it's just vastly underrated. I think for a lot of beginners, they just think, oh, if I work out as much as I like need to, I won't have to worry that much about food. Which, I mean, yeah, if you want to be an average Joe, that might be the case. But if you want to, get any serious, stuff in this sport, I mean, you're gonna have to, really focus on your nutrition. And what were some of the bigger nutritional changes that you made getting into this, other than just eating a lot more? But what were some of the other like minuscule nutritional changes? Because it is individualized for every person too. I mean, what someone does for the nutrition, it's not going to work as good for you, just like with the working out. But what was that individual nutrition journey like for you?
A lot of times, like people first off need to understand that your progress is done through sleep and your food. You just do muscle breakdown in the gym, so that's the easiest part. Most of the people do not sleep and then do the food part. Again, there I have prepped with kind of different coaches. I have tried different things. I have tried keto. I have tried zero fat whatsoever, and I've tried carb cycling. At the end of the day, I pretty much got to where I wanted to look, but again, some are a lot tighter than others. Can I say one's harder than the other? Probably. But again, if you find your balance, like if you're in keto, your salt intake's going to be a little bit higher. So then you get your energy from the fats and the salt, and then the more water and things like that. So you got, again, it's that trial and error of that notebook. Like, what did you do? How did you look? How did you function? Were you bloated? Were you going to the bathroom? There's a lot of different things that you have to dissect down whenever you're choosing what kind of diet is going to actually work for you. I've had competitors where I've had them on carbohydrates going into the show, maybe 4 weeks out. As they were eating those, they were crashing and wanting to fall asleep. So I had to actually move them out because they were spiking their insulin and they were just dragging them down. So then we had to put the fat in. I mean, it's just finding a balance, and it is a science to figure out like exactly what you need to do in order to get your body comp to look the way you want it to look.
Absolutely. And being that, I mean, you've worked with so many people, what would you say just for someone in the average general public is probably the hardest thing when it comes to changing their diet? Because I mean, if the diet was so much easier, I think, the obesity problem would be so much less than it actually is because I mean, people can work out. Just like I told you, I could work out, every day and I'd be fine. It's just that eating part that is the hardest thing.
I think for most beginners, I always tell everybody, we do 6 meals, but if you can at least do five and do breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which most people can do, and then put two shakes in for your snacks, you're pretty much good. The other part of that is the portion controls because you cannot go eat, which we touched base a little bit before. You cannot go eat like McDonald's 3 times a day. Christ, that's like, let's just say 3,000 calories to round it out. A normal human being, is not going to be that. It's normally based at a 2,000 calorie diet. And then if you want to lose any weight, you normally diminish 500 to 250 calories, through your program. You don't do it all at once. You do it gradually. Every 2 weeks, you make those changes. But it's just, you cannot eat heavy meals and then try to eat again in 3 hours, another heavy meal. You would have to space those out longer.
Yeah, you need to have to go on like a 20-mile run after McDonald's, if you did that to even like start to see any weight loss. But yeah, it's just again, I got to bring this up too. There are some genetic freaks too that everyone, you got to be aware of them because I've had people on here that were basically born with a 12 pack where they're like some of my friends that I've had where they could eat 10 Snickers bars a day and they wouldn't gain an ounce of fat, where it's just like, do not base your life off of that because they are blessed. And I always tell them, I hope God's playing a cruel joke on you where you're going to wake up 400 pounds one day, but it hasn't happened yet. So I still have my fingers crossed on that. But the most shocking thing for me when I started this podcast, I was familiar with it, but I just didn't understand because I never competed, how important this was. But it's that so many people do not understand that the most important thing and the hardest thing for so many of these competitors is posing. Would have never guessed it in a million years. I like to compare it now to being a great driver. You can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser. You can never be a perfect poser. It's always ever evolving. What has your experience with posing been like?
Like you just stated, I mean, you can have an amazing physique, but if you don't know how to pose it, you're not going to do very well. We just hooked in with the NPC chairman of our area, where I'm actually going to help host a posing clinic here on the 13th of February. It is very imperative for people to learn how to actually pose correctly. You can have people coach you, but if you've got the posing clinics coming up, like I just advise you to just go to them. Most of them and all of them should be free. And helps you bring the whole complete package to stage, because if you're looking to actually place very well in a show, posing is probably one of the most important parts. You can bring the physique, but if you can't pose it, you're not going to place very well.
Oh, I mean, I don't know how many times I've had to say this to the audience where, yeah, like you said, you could be the most in shape person on the planet. And if you don't know how to pose, good luck, because that is the thing that really makes it or breaks it. But out of your bodybuilding poses, what is your favorite pose and what is your least favorite pose?
I probably I always do really well, and I like the side chest and my back double bi. I don't have full control over the ab pose yet, so I hate the abdominals and thighs. So what I'm planning on doing even this year is hammering and hammering and hammering the posing and stretching because I want to make sure I bring a complete package and being able to be in full control over every muscle group.
Yeah, abs has definitely been the number one answer that we've heard on here, where it's the hardest one, just because it's such an unnatural kind of looking pose, and it's hard to make it look, smooth and transition into it. And yeah, I mean, the back pose would be my favorite, just because my back was the one thing that took off for me, and the fact that that's the one pose where you can put your smile down. You have to have that smile up, because a lot of people do not understand that your jaw muscle might be the most sore thing after one of those shows, just because you have to be smiling the whole darn time. But I mean, let's be honest. I'm one of the whitest people you'll ever meet. I mean, I would have to get like 10 layers of tan to even compete on that stage. But when you get that tan on, I mean, what is that feeling like for you? Because we hear so many stories about how, all of your muscles seem to pop out, and, it makes you look bigger and better. And, you're kind of like, oh my God, I'm ready now. But what is that feeling like for you when you finally look at yourself after all that tan? You're like, oh my God, I look like a completely different person.
I actually tan for a local company back home, Olympia Tan. So I like to give back to the NPC. So I get to watch everybody change and their mouth drop whenever I show them what they look like. And I'll tell you what, I mean, for me competing, that is the worst thing I absolutely hate is that tan. And I don't even care if I place first, last, whatever. I'm getting a shower as soon as I step off stage. Like I can't stand it. Um, Tanning can be tricky. A lot of people over exfoliate, so they end up with a lot of those marks on them, and there's nothing that we can do about that. You can be too dark. So, whoever's tanning you, you really hope to God that, it's a good company and you don't turn green and you have a nice, smooth tan, the golden tan, and watching where that muscle juice, because you can be overwashed out too as well. So, I mean, it does help the muscles pop, but you can overdo it as well. So, it's just, I like to say light on the glaze. I don't like to be heavy because I'm afraid of where those lights are going to hit and if they're going to overshine. But all in all, the definition does get a lot more stronger whenever you do have that dark color on there.
Well, fortunately for me, with this tone, I'm never gonna have to worry about overdoing it. So, it's gonna be just about getting it to that base where you can achieve that. But when you step on that stage, what is that feeling like for you? Because I mean, you've worked months upon months just to be able to step on that stage, and what is that feeling like? When you finally get to show off those results, and just the accumulation of all of that hard work that you put into it.
What I like to even tell like my amateurs and stuff, you work so hard to getting to this point and getting on stage. The last thing you want to do, the very last thing you want to do is get nervous and release cortisol. So, I mean, I have pretty much found that I am so comfortable on stage now. I don't get that nervousness or whatnot. You sometimes do, but you try to have fun, keep your mind off of exactly what you're doing. And I tell everybody that's competing, pretend you're going to the gym. Pretend you're having a nice, super great pump before you walk out on stage and showcase everything you worked so hard for, whether it was a 20-week prep, an 18-week prep. When you walk out on that stage, you're laying it all on the line. And I'll tell you what, it's the most, I mean, I can't describe to somebody that feeling of like what you have when you're on stage and people are just like, admiring all your hard work. You get to showcase it off with a 45 to 60-second personal individual routine, and then later on at night you get to come back and put a mind-blowing routine together.
Yeah, I mean, and I always find it so fascinating because, like, being a baseball player, I walk out on the mound, I pitch like 20 games a year, and then, so you'd have plenty of time to like go out and perform. But bodybuilding, I mean, you work even harder than I've ever worked, and you're only on that stage for, like you said, sometimes even like a minute, and then you go on there at night. So it just even gains me even more appreciation of people that compete in the sport. And when you're on that stage, does time seem to slow down, or does it seem to speed up, or is it sort of a mixture of either?
It kind of goes by pretty quick. I even tell everybody that I train. I'm like, I want you to try to do this. When you go out there, I want you to tell me what song you both do, and nobody can remember because it's so fast and you're so focused, and some people are so scared. But it's just like I've learned to slow myself down and hit every single pose. And I had an interview done with Bill Dobbins, and one of the things that he had told me was when you hold your poses and you do these routines, give them enough time to take those photos. Don't move so fast because the camera lens can only move so fast. On some of the new ones, it's a different story. But he said Frank Zane used to do all his poses out on that stage and take his time so they could get every single photo. And that's how they had all those photos from the magazines back in the day.
That's actually good advice. I've never heard that before. And yeah, that's all. I mean, yeah, I'm one of those guys where I might have actually just rushed through it and stuff. But you brought up a great point, is that, one thing that the general public doesn't understand about at least the posing aspect is that, I mean, the body is not meant to be in that flex of a state for that amount of time that you put on stage. I mean, if you were to take someone from the general public and have them go on stage and pose, they'd last a couple of seconds probably in each of the poses. But sometimes when you're competing, especially when you're doing the, when you're doing the final rounds and going up against everyone, you might hold that for minutes on time. How long into your journey before you think you develop that overall, muscle control that it takes? Because it is a skill that needs to be developed. And I mean, another thing that people don't understand is those posing sessions, you're going to be more sore from those posing sessions than a lot of your workouts, actually.
Oh yeah, and a lot of people will sweat more. I mean, tons of people will sweat more than that. But the biggest thing that I can teach on that is like it's practicing, because again, that's one of those things. They're going to see who's conditioned enough, who can stand out there, amongst your comparisons, who's not sweating, who's not shaking, who has the muscle control. So if you're practicing your pose and you're able to hold that, then you're gonna have very good connection and you're gonna be able to maintain that. But if you don't practice, I mean, you're gonna stand out. You should be able to get up there, hit your poses quick, almost think like military. I mean, it's boom, boom. You want to be striked into that pose, because sometimes if they make those calls a little too quick and you're not in those poses, guess what? They didn't get a chance to look at you.
Yeah, there's so much more to this sport than what I like told you before. A lot of people just think, oh, it's just they work out and they go on stage and they pose. It's like, yeah, you didn't even nail maybe even 1%. But when you were on stage and they announced that you won your pro card, what was that moment like for you? Because for anyone out there who isn't that familiar with the sport, I mean, for a lot of these competitors, winning their pro card is the highlight of their career, just because that is the affirmation that all that hard work that they put into the gym is finally paid off and they can compete in those pro shows.
It was like your heart like sunk, because like, and then they say, and the new, I have to be pro and your name's coming up. But I mean, it was been a long journey for me. It took me 10 years to get that. And as I was going up, every single year I competed, I lost by a point. So it was like so devastating for me not to quit, but I wanted to continue to keep going. I wanted to keep showing my face. I wanted to keep getting better. I wanted to be a name in the sport. I want to be legendary. So I just kept going, kept going, kept going. And then finally in 2016 at the Miami Nationals, I was there, and the name being called was just like, it was like a sigh of relief, but it was just like, you just wanted to scream and jump for joy at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I personally can't imagine what that feeling must be like, but yeah, it's just so amazing. But another myth and stereotype that I love to bust on this podcast, because it's not talked about, and really it's something that I was shocked by too when I first got into bodybuilding, the sport, is that so many people do not understand that look that you present on stage, that is not a sustainable look. You're not going to be able to look like that 365 days out of the year. And I think it's because people watch shows like Biggest Loser, where, people go on there, they lose a couple 100 pounds, and some of them are able to keep the weight off. So then people just assume, oh, those bodybuilders work even harder than those people. They should be able to keep that look that they present on stage. But they don't realize through all the manipulations that you've done with your body, through, the water manipulations, the carbs, all the other things that this sport requires the person to do to compete. What was that like for you, especially coming from an eating disorder where you realize, like, hey, I am going to have to put on weight after this show and I'm not going to look like this forever? And has that gotten easier for you to accept that as your career has gone on?
I'm gonna tell you what, it's hard, because sometimes, like, if you're doing a long prep and you're doing, let's just say 2, 3, 4 shows a year, you've been lean for a long time. So coming out of that and having to adapt to putting on that fluff, and then always you lose the abs first. And I do the same thing with my clients, whenever I train them, I try to reverse them, as much as I can. Because remember, each week you're taking away and taking away and taking away. So you have to slowly put back in so you do not jump up. And I can honestly say this year, 14 years of competing is the first year I'm a month and a couple weeks out of the Olympia stage, and I've only gained 10 pounds. And it's normally unheard of, but it's just, I would tell you what my secret was portion control. But I still have ice cream. I still go to Wendy's. I still have the food. But the same thing I just talked to you about earlier was, I'm going to eat my smaller portions. I haven't even gone past a half cup of rice or one English muffin with my protein. And then I'll have Wendy's. But I won't eat in 3 hours. I might eat in 4 and 5. But if I feel like ice cream that day, I eat ice cream that day. And my weight has been staying at 160. So it is doable and maintainable to do. Now, even when you go to these posing clinics, most of those coaches will tell you, if you're a certain division, don't go over 15 pounds. If you're a certain division, don't go over 20 to 25. Some people, which I don't like, they'll say, I'm having an off season. And then it's like, let's just chase the scale. Well, let's look back and see, what kind of composition are we putting on? Are we putting on slop to chase the scale, or are we putting on lean quality muscle to chase the scale? So that's where the two differences are there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And how were you able to do that during coronavirus? Only put on this 10 pounds because we've had guests on that, had to go like through 11-month preps basically because they started prepping in January and then they weren't able to stop until really December when they competed. But what has this last prep been like for you with coronavirus? Because it's been one thing where, I mean, it's impacted our lives in more ways than we could ever imagine. And how were you still able to work out, especially with the gyms closed? What was your experience like during this whole pandemic?
I have a little bit of different experience than probably most. We do have our own gym. And him and we listened and we shut down only 2 months. And then we legally opened back up early and had to put paper on the windows. But that's a whole other story. But we have not shut down since. There was another shutdown for 3 more weeks and we refused to do it. Him and I've had the best gym year we've ever had in will be 7 years this coming year. So, but I will say that during the pandemic, during the shutdowns, him and I did go in. We cleaned. We did things that we needed to do, to keep the gym apart. But I will say, I had access to a gym. But I'm going to tell you, I was so unmotivated to touch any of those machines in there. Number one, my gym's empty. I said I'm missing my members. I don't know if it's going to fail. What's going to happen? And it's just like you just didn't have the motivation to do it. So I mean, I still trained to keep myself within a report because I knew I had a goal. I knew I still wanted to compete that year. I had signed a contract with Wings of Strength as a brand ambassador. I promised them that I would do a pro show. I got invited to the Rising Phoenix. And I was not going to let them down. So I stayed on board as much as I possibly could, tried to take advantage of that situation, and then ended up with that all three of those magnificent things this year. So it's teaching people to take something so negative and twisting it into something so positive and making it happen.
Did you have any food shortages in Pennsylvania? Because I mean, in Minnesota we had some meat shortages. Did you have to deal with anything like that?
A couple times we've gone to the grocery store, obviously, and everything was wiped out. But I'm one of those psychotic people that have so much food in my freezer already prepped out, already portioned out, and ready to go that it didn't, like a couple of those weeks that had happened, it never bothered me. I had so much backup already ready to go.
Well, we were lucky. We had a neighbor that was a big deer hunter, so we had like a fridge full of venison that we just go over and he'd be like, "Oh, you want some?" And yeah, so we definitely lucked out with that. But I mean, how were you able to, like you said, even your story goes in perfectly with, I mean, like you said, you did not want to work out. I mean, it was hard to find motivation to do that, and so many times people, that's the one thing that takes them away from the journey is that they have that one day where they get, really, really upset where they don't want to work out. And then they just let that plateau. And, all of a sudden it's like a ball rolling down the hill. It just gets worse and worse and worse. But as a bodybuilder, where I mean, working out is your life. I mean, what is that like for you dealing with those type of days, knowing that like, hey, you need to work out, and what is that mindset like for you in order to do that? Because I think once people are able to adapt that mindset, I mean, that's the one thing that really differentiates people that are going to stay and get in shape as opposed to the people that, like some of the friends that I have where they go full ramble and they work out, first of all, 3 hours a day for like a week. And then they're like, oh my God, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. But what is that mental journey like for you?
I mean, I'll say if I had to put myself in the shoes of 90% of what the public had to go through and work at home with fans, I wouldn't. I'm flat out being honest. I wouldn't have done it. I don't. I mean, I have done that so many times in the past. Like when I first started, I had a leader machine downstairs. All that stuff. I would have had no motivation. So I give it all hats off to all these people that have stayed on track and didn't give up on their goals and did work from home. I've had several clients. I worked with them and making them and creating them their own routines, with bands and stuff. I wrote everybody a workout. Jeff and I and one of our trainers, we had done videos in the gym, but we only used stuff that people would have at home. And we created different workouts that these people could watch and then loaded on YouTube. So we were trying to give back as much as we could to keep everybody motivated. And I think the community in the fitness center, like the whole realm of that, everybody just kept everybody on an upbeat through social media through this whole pandemic. Everybody was kind of feeding off of people's videos and what they were doing, and I think that definitely did help.
And especially during this pandemic season, I mean, how is this Olympia different from the other ones? Just because, I mean, obviously there's a lot more precaution taken and there wasn't that many people in the stands as there normally was, but was there any other things that really were just made you like kind of feel like this is surreal? First of all, I find it unique that this is the first Olympia back from, having that not be there for such a long period of time, but then out of all the Olympias, it has to be this one during a pandemic. But what was that experience like?
It was different because I didn't get the chance to compare because the Olympia was in Vegas. Now we got moved to Orlando. So I don't know that whole difference there. I do know what the auditorium was like in Vegas, and it was, magnificent. But then this one here at the Olympia, the stage was just ridiculous. I mean, it was phenomenal. You look at some of the pictures, it was a sold out show. I mean, we were very thankful that Florida let us do what we did and let it kind of just be a show, and that we were able to have it on that kind of stage. I guess I did see some posts of being talked about where do we want it? Do we want it in Vegas? Do we want it in Orlando? There's no date set. That's definitely not on the schedule yet, so we don't even know when the Olympia is going to be. But to walk out on the stage and then you, like I said, you turn around and you got the Olympia, right in front of your face is just phenomenal.
Well, and for anyone not from the States, I mean, Florida, I don't even know if they still think that there was ever a pandemic in the first place. They're the one place where, I mean, they might have been shut down for like a week basically, and then they're just like, yeah, whatever. And it's Florida. They're a different breed of human beings down there, really, when it when it comes to it. But yeah, it's just this whole year. I mean, I could do just a podcast series on it. It's just been so fascinating. But one thing that I love to talk with female bodybuilders about is that, I mean, people don't understand that this is the one sport where, I mean, your fellow competitors generally do care about you. And I mean, it's like you do get along with them off stage, which is rare in sports. How important is that to you to have that, sisterhood, as they call it, and, just know that like everyone does care about each other?
We, especially in Olympia, you probably saw some of my pictures on Instagram. Like me and Margie were just having a ball back there. Um, we did reality TV shows, and there were like 10 of us living in this mansion. And it was my first year coming in, and I thought I was not good enough. I've just got my pro card, got invited to this event, sponsored by Wings of Strength. And I'll tell you what, like these girls are like tight, tight, close iron sisters. I text them on a daily basis, and I'm still in shock. Like, oh my god, like I got a text message from Hella today, or I talked to Margie today, or whatever. It's still kind of jaw dropping that you are in the category and you are with them all. But the tight knit group that we have, we all care. We all help. If someone's suit's falling apart or someone's hair needs fixed, I mean, we all help each other. And yes, it is it a battle zone on stage? Absolutely. But backstage, 2 seconds before we walk out, we're all laughing, carrying on. Margie was singing a song about everybody's number while we were in line. I mean, we just have a blast. I mean, we really do.
And that's just one of the things that I think is just so important. And a question that I also love to ask too is, what was your family and friends' reaction like when you announced to them, hey, I want to give bodybuilding a try?
In the beginning, it was, as soon as you hear the word bodybuilding, it's like, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure you want to be that big? Are you sure? Sure, sure. And then it's like when you show them, what your vision is and what you can look like and what you can make your physique and sculpt your physique into, you start to get a little bit. I'll back up a little bit. When you begin, you get all those little naysayers, like I don't understand, like this isn't, I'm not gonna, claim you as this and that. But then as you start to become successful and you start to become somebody, and then you start to win, the whole twist of it, changes. So in the beginning, you don't have what you have at the end. So my thing, if we're going to tell anybody, is stick to your guns. Do what you want to do.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah, I mean, like just follow you. Follow what you want. Follow what you personally want. If someone doesn't like what you're doing, it doesn't matter because it's your life. So if that's something that you dream of doing and somewhere where you want to go, then do it. Because at the end of the day, it's your life, not theirs. So you do have to block out the negative. Sometimes you need to delete people and walk away from people. But at the end of the day, you want to live with no regrets.
Yep. I couldn't say that better myself. And that was kind of the same thing with podcasting too. Where my parents were like, podcasting, really? It's like, you really think you're going to be successful with that? And, it took a couple of years, but, we're where we're at right now. But one of the things that, I mean, I find so fascinating, especially about female bodybuilders as well, is if you were to walk out in public, and I mean, even during now, I mean, even with when you're all, bundled up in that jacket, we can still see that you're a muscular person. And let's face it, you're not the average looking woman. So like when you walk outside, I mean, I compare it to be like a mini celebrity where, I mean, it's just human nature to have to, just like take maybe a double look at it, or just be like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Like I've never really seen that before. And what has that been like for you, sort of getting used to that? Has it been something where it's still kind of a struggle for you to accept that, I mean, you're going to draw a lot of people's attention, or is it something that you've just gotten used to?
Don't be wrong. There's some days where you don't want bothered. You're going to bundle up in a jacket. You're going to go out in public. You're not going to wear a tank top. I mean, it doesn't matter how hot it is outside, in the summer. And then there's other days where you just don't, I mean, it's appreciated. I have more older women coming up to me asking me if they can touch my arms and how wonderful I look, and they wish they would have done it. I mean, I have I was sitting down on the floor trying to pull something out of the grocery store, and a girl comes around the corner and was like, "I love your Instagram." Like it's just like you just people look up to you when you present yourself the way that you do. So again, it's all based on how you want to present yourself, how you want to become, who you are, in the sport. So I mean, I admire and I will give time. I'm not a snooty person. If somebody wants to ask me a question in the grocery store, I'm going to answer you. I've taken pictures outside in the parking lots, but it's just do it because you are the one that chose the sport, and in one of those sports that you are going to create the attention. So you have to understand that that does come with the territory.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's great that you have that positive attitude with it. And two questions that I love to ask. Well, actually, we have four questions because I'll do the two and two together. I mean, cardio for me is the ultimate trigger word. I hate it more than life itself. But when I say cardio, I mean like actually like running. Like what I'm gonna do when I'm done talking to you is I'll go walk on the treadmill for like 80 minutes and get like 7 miles, and that's easy peasy. I mean, I could do that every single day. But cardio, I mean, that is one thing that I mean I hate more than life itself. But being a bodybuilder, I mean, you have to do cardio, and it's just something that gives me even more respect for the sport. What is your relationship with cardio like?
I've been up and down on that. My legs get really fatigued, and I think it actually hurts me more than it helps me. I feel like my legs are way inflamed, so I do have to back down at some points of time. But coaches, they all have their own different theory. A lot of them like to use cardio heavily. I've done two 60-minute sessions plus my training as well. And it to me, I feel like cardio when I coach people, it's a backup plan. Let the diet do its job, and then if you need the metabolism boost, then you use the cardio. Don't look at it as burning massive, massive, massive amounts of cardio, and then or calories. When you're running, we can't run as bodybuilders because it's going to burn off harder muscle. So we usually use a steady state or a hit, like real quick. But I try to keep them short, durations for all of my clients. But when I'm in prep, I mean, I've had it increased from like 20, 30, 40, 50, sometimes 60. But again, it just depends on what you're looking like and if you need to make more drops and changes.
Yeah, and especially like with being a bodybuilder, yeah, it's just one of those things where you got to really be careful about it because you never know. But the most important thing, I don't care what anyone says. It's even more important than when I was talking about with nutrition. I don't care what anyone says. It's the most important thing is sleep. And for anyone that disagrees with me on that, I always tell them pull an all nighter and then go and work out and then tell me how that goes. I tried that twice in college, and both times I lasted halfway through and I was like, screw this. I'm never doing this again. But I mean, it's such an important thing. And the thing that's different with people though is that obviously people have different sleep schedules. I mean, I'm more of a night owl myself, and some people can fully function on 6 hours, some need to have at least 8 hours, and you have those other freaks where they're just like, yeah, I can need to get 4 hours and I'm fine. But what does your sleep schedule look like, and is there anything that you do to help you achieve that? Because especially in this day and age with technology and everything, I mean, I find that for the general public it's vastly harder for them to fall asleep.
They say, I mean, to get away from all your phones, the TV, to shut them down because they make your brain completely more wired. Stop caffeine, like halfway through the day. Don't drink a lot of water before you go to bed, so you're not getting up. But sleep is very, very, very important. And when you are training for a show specifically, that is the biggest thing. People, we should take naps, but nobody can take naps. We work 8-hour days, 12-hour days, whatnot. But I noticed, and this is just my personal opinion, if I do not sleep, I become very water retentive. And it's almost like I release all this extra cortisol and I look very fluffy and very watery and I will not be tight. Now, going into a show, and let's just say I get extra sleep, I wake up and I'm more shredded and more shredded because your body needs time to heal. It's got to repair itself. So people, I mean, don't get me wrong, you can train yourself to function on 4 hours of sleep and your body will feel okay. But for what it is, you should get 6 to 8, within a good night's sleep, to actually feel recovered, the muscles replenished. Now, if you're not working out or whatever, maybe you can get away with a 4 hour. But if you're working out for proper, repair, you need that 6 to 8 hours sleep or naps in between.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm one of those people where I have probably taken about a handful of naps in my life. I'm just one of those hyperactive people where as soon as I get up, I'm staying up basically. So it's a curse. But now our final two questions. I mean, if someone were to walk up to you and say, we made a decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding, and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you'd like to see changed?
I think that one topic that has been brought up a lot is divisions and weights. because the one thing we've talked about on other podcasts as well was bodybuilders being heavy in weight, and then you still have your other girls that were diehard bodybuilders, but it's almost unachievable to compete against the people at the top of ranks. Me, for instance, was told, I can win any pro show that I want down at this level here. But once I get to those world championships, it's a tough, tough, tough battle because the girls are 40 pounds more than I am. Just an example, I weigh in around, 149, 150 as a heavyweight bodybuilder. And I had a discussion with Irene Anderson right before I walked out on stage at the Olympia, and she's 187. So there is a huge, huge, huge difference. And I think that it would give more opportunity to have more of the female bodybuilders in there as well to have an attainable, to be able to compete. And I understand that there's a big hiccup between the women's physique division because, they don't want to take away from, that division as well. So that's a whole other topic. But I think that if they would do, let's just say like maybe 160 and under, 160 and up, for a lightweight, heavyweight in the bodybuilding division, no different than a 212 class for the open, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I also think they got to do a height thing as well. Being as tall as I am myself, I've had some 6 foot tall bodybuilders on too, and it's like it's kind of not fair when you're having someone who's 6 feet tall going up against someone who's like 5 foot or 5'2", and really comparing size and muscle. So yeah, if they could really like categorize it, yeah, I would totally agree with that. And now, if we were to talk to you a year from today, now again, if we were to have talked to you a year ago today, and you would have predicted a global pandemic and everything that's gone down to happen, I would have called you a liar, and I would have bet my entire life savings against you. So it goes to show you how much little we have when it comes to hindsight. But in an ideal world, where would you like to be at a year from today? What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved with bodybuilding or just your overall life? Where would you like to be at if we were to talk a year from today?
I really, really, really wish that a year from today, you and I could be sitting here and I am telling you that I have the title to the Olympia. That is, like I said, it's the last step, the last goal that I have and last dream. I'm after it. So this year coming ahead, we took some time off. We took about 4 weeks off of training, let the body do its own thing. I didn't touch a weight until actually just yesterday. I started doing legs, and we just want to bring a complete package, mainstream, feminine, symmetry, balance, and a title.
Yeah, and I mean this with all due respect. I'm having Andrea Shaw on for the second time sometime later this week, and that's gonna be a hard person to be. You're gonna need
Uh-huh.
to put in about like 6. Yeah, I mean just because I even told her I was like we're gonna need to get a bigger camera next time because she was taking up like the whole camera basically talking. But yeah, and I mean couldn't talk about a nicer person though too. But yeah, that's just when she won, I was really really happy. But yeah, I think yeah you definitely can give her a run for her money. And I mean just with body, and it's just like with football. It's really any given Sunday, any given day. I mean you never know what's going to happen in bodybuilding. Someone could also, they could maybe accidentally retain too much water. They could, maybe just not pose as well as they could. So really anything can happen. And that's what I appreciate about the sport too, is that, I mean, you can have someone who could just be dominant and then they could just have an off day. It's just like with a lot of other things. So and we do wish you all the best in that. And lastly, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Oh my goodness. I have so many people that I've worked with over the past year. My coach, Brian Hoydick from GC Muscle, Rockin' Pro is very supportive. I just signed in with Gaspari Nutrition, Northern Chill. I work with Mega Fit Meals, my gym, Harlan's Elite Fitness, and our t-shirt shop, Harlan's Elite Customs, S&M Nutrition, who is also with us, and just all the friends and family and support that I get from every single one of you that are going to be listening to this. I wouldn't be able to hold my career and be where I'm at today without any of you guys.
And that's awesome. And again, you guys, we wish her nothing but the best of luck. And I'll leave a link to her Instagram page down below and all the other things like Wings of Strength. And everyone, go give her a follow. And I got to say, buyer beware, though. You will get inspired to get off that couch and stop eating those Twinkies and, get in shape. But again, we cannot thank you enough for coming on. And we wish you nothing but the best. And again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I truly appreciate it.
Well, and that's amazing. And again, you guys, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing off. Have a great day, everyone.